Hi, and welcome to Studio 411. I'm your host, Larry Dasilva, and we thank you for joining us today. And today we have a guest author joining us all the way from New York City, Karen-Cherie Cogane joining us. She's a new author, and she's written a book called The Poodles of Park Avenue. And again, The Poodles of Park Avenue deals with the story of some poodles, among other pets, and again, it's a story of love, caring, and perception about what we have and what we may or may not need from others. And we are glad to have Karen joining us here in studio. Karen, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here, Larry.
Now tell me, we're going to talk in the second half of the program about some of your other accomplishments, as well as your dad, who was, of course, a well-known composer back in the day. But how did you happen to get to the point in your life where you said, I'm going to write a book?
Well, I had been involved in dance professionally. I danced with the Gillespie Ballet for some time, and I'm coming back to New York City. I'll kind of fast forward it. I worked in media for CBS and in advertising. I always had an interest in writing, but then I got very involved in teaching dance, and I was on the faculty of Yeshiva University for many years. And then my personal situation changed. I got married, and I was a New York City resident, but then we moved to the Upper East Side. Now, I had grown up with a poodle, and I've always loved dogs, but I noticed that there were so many poodles and other types of dogs, but what was different is that they were walking often with dog walkers. And it occurred to me there might be a story there about these poodles who may just want attention from their pet parents and don't want to walk en masse with a group of dogs and would rather be with their owners.
Now, you talked about growing up. Now, you had what kind of dog or dogs did you have growing up? Now?
Well, growing up, I had a black poodle, and her name was Duchess, and she was a miniature poodle. She was very, very smart, and she was very well taken care of by my parents, very doted upon, and actually quite musical. My mother would give piano lessons, and she would actually bark to the music, and people hear that and they can't believe it, but it's literally true.
So, and now you mentioned your mom. Your mom was a concert pianist, correct?
Yes, my mother was a concert pianist. She had trained in Manhattan. She came from Minnesota to study piano, and she trained, it was called the Conservatory of Music. It was a precursor to the Juilliard, and she did a lot of recitals in Steinway Recital Hall and Carnegie, I believe, Recital Hall. She was a concert-trained pianist, and then she became a teacher when she raised me. So she had taught a lot of students and coached them. Yeah.
And your dad, of course, we'll talk a little bit more about him later, but again, also in the business, as they say. So you were obviously brought up in a household filled with a lot of cultural activities and just folks that, now you were what, Long Island girl?
Yes, some people say Long Island.
Long Island, that's, yeah, I was being nice. I grew up in Fairfield County, so yeah, it was Long Island.
Yeah, but I grew up in Massapequa, Long Island, which is on the South Shore and very close to the ocean, maybe 15 minutes from Jones Beach. I grew up, our house was about a block from a canal which went right into the Great South Bay, so I, to this day, really love the water. So it's very spread out and very, I would say, very beautiful, very relaxing.
Sure. Oh, yeah. I said to myself, I have to remember to mention this to Karen. There was a movie that I saw within the last year. It was called Brooklyn. I don't know if you heard of it or saw it, but there's a scene in the movie where the young couple who gets married and other factors come into play, but go and they're standing on this big mound, and you're supposed to think that, you're like somewhere in Long Island, and this was in the 50s, and they're like, oh, we're going to build a house here on this property. And I'm thinking, well, I guess in the 50s there was still a lot of land to be had, because not now. I mean, it's, I don't think you could fit another person on Long Island.
Yeah, well, it's very crowded now, and when my parents moved there, it was, I think, much more open space. And then it got built up very, very quickly. And I think there were several schools. Now there may be 4 of them, and loads of shopping centers. And so many people have moved to the island. I think the same as wherever you go, even in Manhattan, there are areas that maybe not as populated. And they can be reasonable, and then all of a sudden everybody hears about Soho or NoHo, and it becomes the next big thing. And you know, but it was a very wonderful place to grow up with. Yeah.
So much more, you felt much more spacious growing up in your area.
It was very spacious. Yeah, we had a about a 10-room house, and a lot of fair amount of land in the backyard, and not that far from the beaches. So that was nice. But I was often in a ballet class, so I wasn't really hanging out that much.
Not out riding the bicycle.
Well, I did that as a kid. I loved the outdoors. I actually loved the outdoors, and I love the water. So.
Karen-Cherie Cogane joining us here for the hour on Studio 411. The book, The Poodles of Park Avenue, by Tate Publishing, tatepublishing.com for more information. And also you can check out let's see, we've got the Poodles of Park Avenue, Facebook. What else did I miss?
Well, Poodles of Park Avenue under Karen-Cherie Cogane is on Google as well. Okay. And then there's the Karen Cogane Facebook page. But I would say the most popular one would be the Poodles of Park Avenue Facebook page. And also Twitter as well under Karen Cogane.
There you go. Now we get to we had a great shot of a dog that looks very much like the poodle on this cover of this book, and also over here. Simone, tell me, obviously Simone, you got a lot of inspiration, I gather, from not only the dogs you saw walking around Manhattan where you live, but also from your childhood. So again, Simone is pretty pampered pet, I will say. Say that 3 times.
Pampered pet, yes, she is very, very pampered, indeed.
And the family that is bringing her up, I find that it's very much kind of they seem a little self-absorbed. Would that be a fair thing to say?
I think that they're very, very self-absorbed. Raymond is the pet father of Simone, the coined phrase, and he's a very self-absorbed investment banker who works in Wall Street, working very, very long hours. And his wife Raymond does, his wife Grace, I've got Raymond on the brain, Grace does some charity work and has her hands full just keeping him organized. Right. They have staff, they have a butler, they have a nanny. So Simone is really, she often feels like their trophy dog. She feels like, she has a bedroom, she has this delicious food, she has anything almost a child would want or anyone would dream of, but yet she feels something is missing because she's not getting the love and attention that a pet, any animal, requires.
And pet, I would say pets, because again, I have a Beagle blue tick hound, and pets, they'll let you know if they don't feel they're getting your attention. Sometimes they want too much attention, and it's hard because obviously in the case of the couple you mentioned there, Simone's parents, we live in an age where, again, people are just so like helter-skelter all over the place that it's very hard to, sometimes whether it's with their children or their pet, which really is kind of an extension of almost, it is like having a child, it really is. But don't tell that to Simone. Simone, I think, knows it all. I have to ask, in the book you mentioned, she has a very high DIQ for myself and the viewers, educate us, DIQ.
Oh yes, that is, she has a very high, she would say, dog IQ. She considers herself to be extremely intelligent, and she knows some French because poodles used to be the national dog of France, and her nanny plays Tchaikovsky, and she dances around to Tchaikovsky, and she's very sophisticated, and her dog walker Frank takes her to a lot of cafes, and she sits with him, and they have lunch, and she's very urbane. So yes, she considers herself to be very smart, and she feels that she understands her pet parents, Raymond and Grace, more than they understand her. So.
would it be safe to say, again, as I was reading the book, I'm thinking, well, you know, I'm seeing this, and I'm a big believer that, you know, 10 people can look at something, be it a piece of literature or a photo or whatever, and everybody interprets things different, you know.
Yes.
So I'm looking at it, and so far I'm batting 1,000, where I said, oh, you know, these people strike me as this or whatever. But Simone, again, just a little kind of a little upper crust, would you say? You know, just she's very kind of wants what she wants when she wants it. Would you say?
That happens to be true. Yeah, she does want what she wants when she wants it.
Whereas, like one of her pals there, Mojito,
Mojito.
yeah, he's very much kind of like a more easygoing pet, and they seem to kind of clash. Which, you know, I thought, well, maybe Karen is trying to say to. You know, well, you know, kind of another example of trying to get along with people that may be either different breeds in this case, or if we're dealing with people, different ethnicities, different religions. Sometimes, you know, again, it takes all kinds to make the world go around. So,
right. I mean, there's a definite message there. Simone walks with Mojito, and she feels that he's got a crush on her. He you know, looks at her in that way, and she says, "Je suis poodle," so she likes the poodle if she wants a boyfriend, or a Bichon, someone like herself. Not that she doesn't have friendship for him, but in a romantic way, she wouldn't want to be with Mojito. Mojito lives on Park Avenue with his pet parents, but he's a Chihuahua. He's feisty. He sniffs her. He's not as refined as she is, and sometimes she's very annoyed with him when he does things she thinks maybe are a little not proper, but at times she feels glad to see him because he is really her only friend. And as time goes on, they get to know each other better.
Yeah, I definitely got that. And I felt both, you know, grew, but definitely I kind of felt that as she experienced more, traveled more, meaning that obviously explored, you know, the borough of Manhattan more, that I think, you know, became more educated, more accepting of things, you know, whereas sometimes I think when you're holed up in a, you know, a penthouse, you know, be like the Jeffersons. Yeah, you could have all the money in the world, but if you're locked in this penthouse and don't get out, you really can't experience what's out there to enjoy, you know.
Well, one of her main things is she looks out her window and she dreams of new adventures. She wants to know what life is like beyond Park Avenue, where her dog walker Frank walks her and Mojito. She wants to go over to Lexington Avenue, or dare I say to 2nd Avenue or 3rd Avenue. He does take them to Madison Avenue and they go to Central Park, but she has the desire to go to other places, and she's hoping that along the way, along these routes, she'll meet her soulmate. So it's kind of twofold there. She wants to see the city and hopes to find some romance along the way.
I neglected to ask you before. Now, the book is tailored, I believe the term, because I learned that from a past guest. Am I correct? Tweens, which is kind of like not young first readers and maybe not late teens, but kind of an age bracket in between.
Right.
With, of course, messages for, you know, all ages, even adults, which, again, is what I got out of it as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you're going to categorize it, I would say middle grade, and I think even more tweens, which is that first couple years, you know, like maybe 11, 12, 13. But I do think adults, college students, and even adults, children and their parents, hopefully will enjoy the book. And because there is a message, I think just no matter how many material things you have, whether you're a pet or a person, I think everybody really wants friendship and love. And I think that's pretty universal. I think everybody can relate to that.
Absolutely. Karen-Cherie Cogane joining us here for the hour on Studio 411, the book, The Poodles of Park Avenue. Tate Publishing, tatepublishing.com for more information. I wanted to mention something. You and I didn't talk about this off air, but I heard this on the news the other day, and I said, I said Simone and Frank and all the gang would like this. I just read where the governor of New York signed a bill recently allowing dogs in outdoor restaurant settings. Did you hear about that?
Yes, I did.
So there you go. Now your next book, you'll be able to say, hey, you know, because I've seen that. I wanted to tell you the story. Vacationing in Florida, Sanibel Captiva Island, And there was a
Yes.
woman at an eatery that we go to whenever we're down there. And I mean, no one's wearing a jacket, so that idea was out. But the woman is like trying to hide this little dog, I forget what breed it was, inside of this bag. And it's like, and it was outdoors, so they kind of, everything's kind of more easygoing there. But I thought to myself, can we, unfortunately, that's really not the place to do that, because a lot of places have laws and health codes regarding that. But I'm glad to see now that New York, at least, is kind of joining the the movement.
The ranks.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
they say that sometimes dogs, especially their paws, believe it or not, I've read where they say that cleaner than most people.
I think that's true. Well, as a matter of fact, in the book, Simone, Frank, and Mojito frequent a outdoor restaurant called Café Beaucoup. And he takes them there, and they sit on the chairs, and sometimes Mojito will be relegated to the floor. It depends on how he's behaving that day.
Sure.
But for all intents and purposes, they sit on the chairs, and he feeds them, and the waiters rush over to them, and that's sort of their haunt. He takes them to other places too. If they go to a coffee shop, some that I've had in the book, he'll put them on a pole and come out quickly to get them. But actually, we go to some cafes on the Upper East Side that their dogs go to, and they have the little dog bowl outside, and the dogs seem very happy. That is until the food comes. So when the food comes, then they really want to be they want to be eating. They don't want their water. They don't want to be standing on the floor, and they want to be on the
sure.
table. So that's kind of the difficult
and I
part.
noticed Simone wants the Perrier. She doesn't
Oh,
want
yes.
regular tap water either. So
Right.
But the other dogs are probably just as content drinking from the
Yeah.
fountain over in Central Park. But,
Yeah, she said when she went to Central Park, I'm not used to this, or what is this? But she said, I'm very thirsty. I'm going to drink it, but I really miss my Perrier.
There was a quote that I found very amusing. I have to find it. I think you might have touched on it. Frank stopped off at a cafe, left Mojito and me outside. He went in to get a cappuccino, wrapped our leash rather around the pole. All I could think of was what they used to do with the horses when they were
Right.
outside the saloon. And of course she was, why can't we go inside while he has his coffee? And so she was very, very indignant about the whole thing.
She was miffed. I think she feels like she's really a person,
Yeah.
and she feels like, well, if the humans are inside drinking coffee, then let's create a coffee that dogs can drink, or at least bring us inside. Why are we out here? She would rather be, I think, where the action is.
Yeah, exactly.
And get the attention. But Frank is very good. He's quite attentive, and he really does care about them.
You think with pets, and we'll stick with dogs, I mean, it could apply to cats as well, but that there is kind of like a class system where, animals kind of feel that they're, better than others, or you think that's more just in humans' heads?
I think maybe a little bit of both. I know as far as the story goes, Simone feels was je suis poodle. She has compassion for other animals. She has compassion for people, but she definitely knows her stature and her place. But at the same time, she believes in love, and when she looks for a love interest, she's hoping to meet a poodle, but I don't think she necessarily says he has to be a white poodle who originates from France. I think she's sort of a little open-minded as far as that goes. But I do think with pet owners, there's kind of a caste thing. I've noticed even after writing the book, because I'm working on another one, and just in general, observing people walking down the street, it seems that people have more of a Bichon or a Pomeranian, seem to strut a little more with the dog. They almost look a little like the dog, and in a sort of unique way. And sometimes people who have maybe sloppy looking dogs may dress that way. So
another theme that I took again from the book was, and you touched a little bit on it, was live a little, don't be so uptight and formal in life. And that's kind of the impression you get with Simone, is that she, again, just like the parents or whatever, but then you see Frank, you see the gentleman who's Mojito, Ricardo's father.
Oh, Jorge?
You know, Jorge.
Yeah, Jorge.
You know, that they just, everything is very, you know, cool. Of course, when I saw Spanish Harlem, I thought, okay, everybody's, you know, kind of just, you know, hanging loose, whatever, no big deal. But, you know, they are, you know, man, do you find that in Manhattan proper, that people are very, you know, very regimented, or?
You mean regimented as far as they live in a certain area and they only want to stick to that area, that kind of thing?
That too, but I mean, just in terms of, again, just kind of going back to that kind of caste system where, you know, they just kind of feel like, you know, we're up here and everybody else follows along, you know.
Well, I don't know. I think that can be in Manhattan or really anywhere. I think it actually depends on the person, because sometimes I find that the most successful people, and often the richest, and however you define rich, are often the nicest people. And sometimes those, I think, that are insecure are those that are perhaps frustrated. But I would say there's definitely some kind of feeling you get when you walk on Park Avenue that you're walking on a very fancy avenue, and the people seem to act accordingly.
As I always said, whenever I'm in New York, which I don't get to that often, is don't stare up at the sky, otherwise you give away that you're a tourist.
Oh, yeah.
Always, you know, kind of look, but you know, like you kind of look like this, so you okay, you know, and know where you're going, you know.
Right.
And then don't hesitate to ask. But of course, now with technology, I'm sure, you know, it'll just tell you where to go. But it's fun just to kind of, you know, hopefully like the dogs did, broaden your horizon. Like, well, I've been here, I've been there, and let me walk a little further this way or a little. And that kind of reminded me when I was reading the book, was that it's like folks that don't get to New York that often, is that you're always trying to broaden your horizon. In Simone's case, especially when she's trying to find the boyfriend, love of her life, or so she believes, is that, okay, go here, go there. And it's just, you know, and eventually even goes to Spanish Harlem, which is pretty cool. You know.
Well, it's really, I think, interesting, and Frank, without giving away the story, does actually live in Spanish Harlem. And she wound up in Spanish Harlem for her first time because he had something to take care of. And Mojito, who lives on Park Avenue, I think felt more at home there. But then she felt a little funny, but then there was something good that happened to her, which I don't want to give away.
Sure.
She sort of started thinking, well, it's not so bad here in Spanish Harlem. Maybe I'll come back.
Now, this dog here in the picture, is that what kind of dog? Is that a poodle or?
No, actually, that was at my NYU alumni weekend party. That's a borzoi or bourgeois. I forget
I was
the
going to
exact
say the nose is too elongated to be a poodle.
No, it actually is a show dog. The owner came in with him, and I just had to go over to him. It was such a beautiful dog, and I said, "Oh, is this a show dog?" Because he was very, very big. And the owner told me, "Yes, we show him." And the dog, I think, was the biggest hit of the party.
And there's Simone in her whatever IKEA-looking settings. Obviously, an example of what a show dog or a show poodle perhaps would be living in.
Yes. Well, actually, that particular posting was something I had done on the Poodles of Park Avenue Facebook page, and it was where I was wishing Happy Mother's Day to French mothers. And so I took it from the standpoint that Simone imagined herself in Paris, and she imagined going to the Eiffel Tower and the Arc de Triomphe. And she felt she would love to walk down the Champs-Élysées, and please, Pet Father Raymond, take me there. And this, by the way, I posted this picture, and this is how I would look if I was in a French hotel room or in a French suite.
Very comfortable, yes.
Yeah, very comfortable.
Where's the caviar?
She's raring to go, yeah.
Tell me now, obviously you talked before about some of your other past careers, et cetera, but as far as writing, what literary influences pushed you towards writing? What kind of books do you enjoy? What authors do you kind of, not necessarily model yourself, but that you said, wow, that's, I'm just thrilled to even be in the same field, much less, as you know.
I can't really answer that question without mentioning my father, Nelson Cogane, because even though I'm writing books and he wrote songs, each song is is like a story. And that song, We Three, which was written in 1940, actually still played today around the world, was written for my mother. It was a love song during the war years. So I was very, very influenced by him and his talent and his compassion and his humanity, and my parents, the way they encouraged me in writing and in all the arts. So I think one thing led to another. I always enjoyed writing as a child, as well as dancing, and did it in college and wrote for the radio station at Indiana University, and actually got my degree in telecommunications, and it took script writing and worked in advertising. So, but as far today, I mean, I love Lewis Carroll, and I love J.D. Salinger, and I've been reading a lot of biographies. For example, Valerie Harper's biography, and William Bell, who created The Young and the Restless and The Bold and the Beautiful.
Okay, yeah.
And so I enjoy reading, not just because they're famous, but I think they're very, very interesting people, and finding out how they got to the point they're at, because it's not just the top, it's going from wherever you are to get to the top. And people often don't realize the journey. It's the journey. And nothing is easy. It doesn't have
a lot of twists and turns.
A lot of twists and turns. So I'm very, I love to read, and I'm open to reading all different types of books.
Karen-Cherie Cogane joining us for the hour on Studio 411. The book, The Poodles of Park Avenue, TatePublishing.com for more information. Let's see now. I was going to ask, what was my other... yes. Who would you envision doing the voiceovers of the book characters if you could ever make a film about them?
You know, I was thinking actually about that question recently, and I was thinking, I wonder if you would ask me that. But
so who would do Simone?
Oh, let's see. For Simone, I think there could be there are a number of names that pop into my head. Maybe someone like, I mean, certainly it could be someone unknown that has a very...
Right, but you want to go for Boffo,
right, of course.
star
of course.
power. So
star power, I would say maybe someone like Nicole Kidman,
okay.
or Reese Witherspoon, or...
How about Ricardo?
Ricardo, maybe Brad Pitt, Wilder Valderrama.
I was going to say, but Ricardo, wouldn't he have a little bit of an accent, or am I?
He has, yeah, he
I
has
was
a little.
thinking maybe an Antonio Banderas.
Yes, Antonio Banderas would be very
See,
good.
I'm casting the movie
Yes,
already.
yes, okay.
Now, what about Frank? Yeah,
when do we come to Hollywood?
That would be more of a character actor. Who would play Frank?
Frank is very intelligent. He's very affable. He has a lot of compassion, and he loves the poodles, the dogs, very, very much. I mean, it could be someone like perhaps Brad Pitt. He does do character roles. It could be someone like Tom Cruise. Could be someone, maybe an older actor. I'm trying to think. No one comes to my mind. Well, actually, Frank isn't old. He's in his 30s.
Right, yeah.
So maybe a Brad Pitt or a Tom Cruise if they wanted a different type of role, because Frank has got a lot of style and class, and he does actually fit in perfectly on Park Avenue, even though he lives in Spanish Harlem.
And what about Mojito?
Oh, Mojito.
I have an idea, but I'll wait till you say it.
Someone Spanish. Right now, I mean, I'm not sure, actually.
And I'm blanking on the person's name when I think about it.
Wilder Valderrama, as I mentioned before, or someone who's just really funny. Why can't I think of more actors now? I don't know. But
the one I'm thinking about is a Latino gentleman, a comedian, Broadway star. He's been on Broadway, let's put it that way, and is an actor. And I'm just, right now, I can't come up with it. But
or the gentleman that is the star of Hamilton, maybe.
Yeah, no, that's now you're going into territory that most folks aren't familiar with.
Yeah, but I would say someone who can do comedy very, very well. He's got a nice sense of humor and can do voices very well. Someone who's very feisty, or someone who can really portray feistiness well.
Yeah, and I cannot think of who it is right now. It's going to, about 2 o'clock this morning, I'll be like, that's the person I wanted to say. But it'll come to me. It'll come to me. But so see, we've got the whole thing. And notice, no matter who the person was, Brad Pitt was always like working its way. Tom Cruise, no, it's.
I think
he'll take over the whole movie. It'll be a Scientology
I think
picture.
maybe to do Raymond, maybe someone like George Clooney, if I had my pick. He has got that.
Now Raymond is what, the parent?
The pet father of Simone.
I'm seeing like more of a character actor, because they're really like kind of more, in my opinion, more kind of behind the scenes.
Yes.
I noticed the mother seems to kind of become more exuberant and more forthcoming as the book goes on.
Yes.
But otherwise I see a lot of kind of more secondary actors doing that.
Well, in the
we'll put it in the contract.
We'll put it in the next book that I'm working on. They're going to take a bigger role. So
now what? So now I was going to ask towards the end, but what's the latest project you're working on?
Well, I am working on sequel, and it's picks up where the first book leaves off. Mojito will have a bigger role. The pet parents, Raymond and Grace, will have a bigger role.
John Leguizamo.
Oh, yes.
There you go, see.
He would be good.
Yeah,
for
and then
Mojito.
for his wife, you could get, or if he gets married, Rosie Perez.
Oh, yes,
Yeah,
that would be good.
See, that'd be great.
Yes.
Just to hear the voice. I could magic. So.
Yes.
We turn now, as we get a little bit away from the book, talk about some aspects in your life. There's a photo going back only a couple of years ago to when you were ballet. Now, how did you get started in ballet? Obviously very young, as most kids do.
Well, I started in ballet at 7 years old with Andrei Glevsky. He was a renowned ballet dancer, soloist, Russian ballet star who had come to the United States and eventually wound up being a soloist with New York City Ballet. And coincidentally, he started a studio in Massapequa where my parents moved, and my mother actually had gone to a company to fill in for the accompanist that particular day, and she couldn't get a babysitter, and she brought me, and actually heard the music, and I just started dancing.
Took over the joint.
I took over the joint, and he said, well, bring her back when she's 7, and my parents brought me back, and I studied with Glevsky from 7 to 17 and performed in the company and dancing, and I was on TV, American Musical Theater, lecture demonstrations, Nutcracker, Coppelia.
What was that show? And again, I'm blanking. That Leonard Bernstein used to be on it a lot, but it was the CBS ran it on
Young
Sundays.
People concert?
Yes,
Yeah.
That was.
This was American Musical Theater that I believe the producer was Ethel Burns, and she would have different people from the arts come on the show, and Glevsky came and had brought some of his pupils, and I was a little girl, well, about 9 or 10. We did a demonstration, and that photo that we saw previously was when I was at Indiana University, and I danced in Giselle. And actually, Natalia Makarova, who was also from Russia, there's a theme there, and she came from American Ballet Theater to dance in Giselle, and I wound up actually playing her mother, which was one of the leading roles as a freshman, so that was a studio shot from that time.
Now, what do you think with the state of education, which always seems to work into my questions, because again, I'm a very vocal sometimes on the state of education in this country, but as far as I see, whether it's in languages and whether it's in the arts, whatever, that kids today, do you think they have the same advantages that we did growing up? But with all these budget cuts, maybe it's harder to kind of get them culturally aware. I know they have their little electronic devices, but they don't seem to be getting exposed to the arts the way they should.
Yeah, well, I think that oftentimes mothers, sometimes fathers, want their little girls to take ballet. I think that's often, it's pretty common. But many times the children, for whatever reason, may not stick with it for that long. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But I definitely feel arts education is of utmost importance, and that it should be included. I believe now it's included in public schools. But many times what happens, it's the arts are the first programs to be cut, even if it's part of the curriculum. The administrators sometimes feel that it's not necessary. Exactly. It's not as necessary as a math or a science. social studies, computer science, or whatever. And I to that say it is extremely necessary, just as because it makes a child, preteen, young adult, teenager so well versed, and I think it gives a child sensitivity and exposure. And I think what more to do that than picking up a paintbrush or picking up an instrument or doing movement or learning languages. You don't have to be the next Picasso or the next Margot Fontaine, but just expose your children to it. And I think they may not thank you immediately, but I think as time goes on, they'll appreciate. And plus, when they're older, I think they'll have more of an understanding as an audience member.
Sure.
And that's,
absolutely.
I think, very, very important, you know, especially in this area, metropolitan area, all
Right,
throughout the country.
And where you grew up, a little more than where I grew up in Lower Fairfield County, but certainly in the Long Island, New York area, again, that emphasis is still there to some degree. Then you get in Middle America, Rural America, other parts of the country, again, due to budget cuts, whatever, a lot of those things are very difficult to access, even though, again, the world should be available to us via the computer and whatever. Still, you know,
Right.
I see, you know, a gap building there. It's
Right.
unfortunate. But
I think just briefly, just to say that, you know, kids today are on their devices so much on the computer. And as you said, it's wonderful because you can see so many, learn so many things. But I think there's definitely something to be said for that face-to-face interaction and what you get in the arts by learning to dance, learning to speak a language, drawing a picture is not necessarily the same as what you're going to get on the computer, because you're you're participating, you're actively engaging, you're not really an observer. And I think there's a difference.
Sure.
And it instills that in someone.
we've got if we can get a shot of this, We Three, the ink spots. So ink spots, for those of you who go ink spot, well, what's an ink spot? They were a quartet, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Or
Yes.
a quintet, a quartet.
Quartet, yeah.
Gentlemen, there's a song, We Three, My Echo, My Shadow, and Me, that Karen referred to earlier. One of the co-writers, Nelson Cogane, again, that is a 45 children. So again, it's always cool stuff. And actually here is the sheet music, which I'll hold open right there. There you go. And I have to ask again, I always, when we have musical performers, or in this case, someone like yourself, who obviously is a family member, was an esteemed writer, when it comes to royalties and things like that, how does that work? I mean, and then it's even more confusing because obviously there were 3 people on this recording.
Right.
In other words, did he, like in later years, get, you know, obviously royalties for these songs that he did, or again, how did that work back in those days?
Well, I mean, when you sign the contract or the arrangements with the record companies, things can be renegotiated. But there were 3 writers, Dick Roberts and Sammy Mizell, and my father, Nelson Cogane. So the royalties are divided up between the 3. And now, since my father passed away, unfortunately, although he still feels very much here with me, but the estate will get the royalties. So first it became my mother, and then now it is me.
Okay,
And the
so it
same would
does pass
apply
on.
to the Sammy Mizell's
Gotcha,
estate and
yeah.
Dick. And the song actually is still garnering attention and
Absolutely.
getting royalties. It's played all throughout the world, so I'm very proud of that.
Here's what looks to me like a 78, which is again a larger kind of, larger than a 45, but smaller than a 33 and a third LP. I think I've lost some folks, but anyway, that's what that is. Glenn Miller in the orchestra with a vocal by Ray Eberle and the Modern Airs, which is very impressive. Of course, Glenn Miller, one of the biggest big band performers until his untimely death during World War II. And then the Glenn Miller Band went on. And here's a song. Again, we have this here, Yesterday's Gardenias, again, co-written by your dad. And I noticed a trend there. He and Dick Robertson and Sammy Mizell seemed to work quite a bit together.
Yes.
And was that by just choice, or was that they just kind of...
Well, it was before I was born, but you know, the writers would meet, congregate at the Brill Building, and I guess they developed an affinity for one another, a friendship and common denominators. And I believe Dick Robertson was a band leader and had a lot of connections in that arena. and they were all writers. So I guess they worked
you
together, and they, did a number of other songs.
You
But my
mentioned
father wrote
the
with
Brill
other
Building, so that really was the generation that came before the Carole King, Neil Sedaka,
Yes.
all those folks that really made the Brill Building such a name in the 50s and 60s.
Right.
So your dad was part of that earlier generation.
Yeah, the Tin Pan Alley.
Yeah.
Yeah. As my mother said, my father called the Brill Building his second home. He was always there.
Interesting.
He also wrote with Jerry Livingston, and the song with Sammy Fain, and there were Dennis Agay, and there were a number of other writers.
Jerry Livingston, if I recall, and I don't know, we'd have to look that up, but I'm trying to think if he co-wrote Silver Bells, and I think he might have written Que Sera Sera. I don't know.
He might have.
I know the name very well, but
Yes, he is very
But again,
well
there was a
known.
lot of pairings. But with your dad, it was funny. I don't think I'd ever seen where it was three writers that consistently worked
Yes.
together and stuff. Now, tell me, clear something up. Back in the late 40s, early 50s, there was a series of movies that stretched even to the mid 40s, and then later a TV or radio show or both. The Henry Aldrich series. Now, did your dad, was he involved with music for that? Or, because it seems to be kind of he and another writer, some people thought your dad was writing under another name or whatever.
Yeah.
Did he have anything
Well,
to do with it?
yeah, I believe he wrote the theme song
Yeah.
for Henry Aldrich show, and that was in the early throes, I think, maybe in the 30s or early 40s,
but
something like that. And I think when he started, he might have written under another pen name of Jack
Miller. See, that's
yes,
why there was
yes,
some
yes.
confusion. I was trying to
Yes,
say, well, let me
no,
go over
that was him.
So
I happen to know that.
Yeah, so Jack Miller really is your dad.
Yes,
then.
he's Nelson Cogane.
Okay,
Yes,
because
yes.
somebody said, well,
The family's name was sort of without going back too much into ancestry, was changed along the way, and Nelson became his, professional Nelson Cogane
Gotcha.
professional name. But when that was in the early throes before the name was changed, and he went under Jack Miller, and that was, I believe, for not too long a time, but that he did write the theme for that. So you are very, very
well,
correct.
there was something I had seen, and someone said, well, they both passed away around the same time. I believe your dad passed in 1985. And so
Yes,
people were like,
yes.
wait a minute, is this just coincidence, or
No,
are they one and the
no.
same person?
It's the same
And I
person.
left with really still not having an answer. And I said, I made a note. I got to ask you about it. Fast forward here to a shot from a CD from 2012, Sir Paul McCartney. And I pulled this up because I wanted to make mention that all these years later, Paul did a CD about, I guess, a lot of the music that influenced him, or that he
Yes.
recalls his mom and dad, mom before she passed at when he was a young boy. And We Three was on that CD. So that had to be, did you get a phone call, or did you just one day say, well, my dad's song is on a Paul McCartney
I'm
CD?
trying to remember exactly how that happened. I believe I, intermittently, check even to this day on the internet to see what recordings there are. And since I'm the person who handles, the estate of Nelson Cogane, and I also like to know what's going on, make sure everything is on the up and up. And I happened to notice, and I said, oh my God, what's this? So I happened to notice, I think it was probably the month it came out, or a month after, and I said, oh, what wonderful. So I was very, very happy. And then coincidentally, someone I knew from Indiana University just got in touch with me also and said, oh, did you happen to know that your father's song We Three is now on Paul McCartney's CD? And I wrote back, I said, thank you very much.
Yeah,
and I know.
All of a sudden, the cash register is lighting up.
Oh,
All of a
well,
sudden, the estate is like, okay.
Well, actually, there's more history to that, too, because Paul McCartney is a publisher, a very well-known publisher of music, as most people know, and it's called MPL Publishing, and that stands for McCartney, Paul, Linda, his beloved first wife, Linda, who was actually the daughter of the noted copyright and entertainment lawyer Lee Eastman, who my father knew. So MPL happens to be the publisher of We Three for the last probably 15, 20 years. So I imagine Paul was going through his catalog of songs, and he really loved standards, because he grew up, he was very, very influenced by them writing, And if you listen to the beautiful lyrics and melodies, you can hear that if you hear Yesterday or Here, There, and Everywhere or All My Loving or I Want to Hold Your Hand. I mean, they're just so melodic. They're so beautiful.
And My Love from Wings.
Oh,
and,
yes,
so many others. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, so again, and he's a smart businessman. So
Very
I have no
smart
doubt
businessman,
that
very-
if he acquired that many years ago, then obviously he did, because again, from the articles I read on that CD, was that again these were songs that just really he always remembered being played, as a boy growing up in, I assume, the Liverpool area.
Yes.
And
Yes.
then said, hey, I'm gonna do a, and plus too, he had gotten remarried at that point, so all of a sudden he was kind of in a,
Sort of
nostalgic,
softer-
and I think also trying to convey his affection to the new bride. That's the
right.
impression I
And
got.
wrote a song for her. I
Yeah,
forget
there's
which one he penned.
There's 2 songs on
for her.
the CD.
Yeah,
that are
Nancy
original.
Chevelle, I think,
Yeah,
or something.
but then
like
the other ones are all these
Standard.
hidden gems, and
Yeah.
that's great that they find.
Yeah,
Plus
I was
something I
very
didn't know
happy.
until recently. Now your dad wouldn't have been writing then, but anything pre, I want to say 1917, is considered public domain. But then
Right.
anything post 1917, why I don't know, is
Right.
is obviously where you have to pay royalties. So, but it's funny what you said too about checking this and checking that, because I've noticed the theme with musical guests, especially if they've written a lot of their own material, is that again it's always very much you want to make sure that you're getting what you're entitled to. In this case, obviously via the estate. But those that are still alive, sometimes with all the streaming and all the this and the that, they feel that they're not getting a fair shake as far as the royalties that they're deserved.
There's a lot of illegal downloading going on. Some of it you can't, let's say, avoid, or you can't check every little thing, but you try and be on top of it as much as possible. As a matter of fact, about, I would say, a year and 3 months ago, was back in September of last year. Over a year ago, We Three was actually on the blacklist, the James Spader
the TV
hit.
show.
Yeah.
When you said blacklist, I thought it was.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
television show,
No,
okay,
the
yeah.
television
Yes,
show.
like,
Let me rephrase it.
We don't want to burn
No,
we
no,
don't want
no.
to burn the lyrics. No,
No,
okay.
no,
The show, The Blacklist.
The show,
Ah,
The
yes.
Blacklist, the NBC hit show
Yes.
starring James Spader. And it was featured prominently in the show. And again, someone I knew from Indiana let me know.
Nice.
And I heard it, watched it, replayed it. And it was part of, they said, listen to this recording, a woman in the show, because I knew of the show, but I hadn't really watched it much. I was busy and I hadn't really watched it much before. And the woman in the character, the actress said, in character, listened to this record to another character in the show. And she said, listen, and it was We Three, and then they played it again. So it's part of actually the plot, was part of the show. So when I had received the royalty statement, without going to every little specific, from the Songwriters Guild, they monitor, and I'm a member. I didn't see I thought it was low for a television, major television, so I got in touch with them, and they had to get in touch with MPL, and they said, yes, you're correct, it hasn't been added, but it will be in the next one. So, because it takes a while for the licensing to be paid.
Your dad's compositions, again, however many, I assume there has to be quite a few, because this was his livelihood.
Yes.
But again, is everything under that one publishing house, or is it scattered depending on the
There's
deals?
MPL, and there's also Universal Music.
Okay.
Universal,
And
yes.
Universal was, going back, for those who don't know, was Decca and Cap
Right.
and all these record labels. Later on, UNI was acquired, and everything was under that Universal
Right.
Records, which is actually a subsidiary of Universal Pictures now.
Right,
but back in those days, yeah.
Yeah, because We Three started with Decca.
Sure.
Since you
Oh,
mentioned
yeah,
it.
Decca, the home of Bing Crosby.
Right.
Yeah.
And he has a song called Is There Somebody Else, which was recorded by Ella Fitzgerald and the
Is that the one that
Dreamweavers.
we just had a clip of that a little while, the 45, the Dreamweavers, yeah.
Oh, I
Yeah,
missed it.
we had it, yeah.
Yeah, and that one is with Universal. I'm getting tongue-tied, I'm sorry. Universal, and then there's Under the Mistletoe, which is also with Universal.
Now, during like the years when you were growing up, in kind of in a nutshell, what did your dad continue to do? Did he write again more deviate more for television, movies, or was, what did he do in his later years? Because there's not a
Well,
lot of information on him.
yeah, well, actually, in his later years, when my parents had moved to Massapequa, Long Island, he would come into the city to go to the Brill Building or to go to ASCAP. He also, he worked on different compositions. One was called What Does the Lord Look Like with Dennis Agay. They worked on new arrangements of We Three, different music versions, and there were a lot of different recordings of it. And it's a matter of the composer trying to get together with the A&R people and the publishers to try and get Brenda Lee, for example, recorded in the
early
60s and
yeah.
K-Star, and then actually wrote another song which unfortunately he passed away, and he was working on it at that time. And he was also affiliated with a newspaper on Long Island that he handled the advertising for and wrote, did some writing. So between both of those things, he was always very busy.
Do jingles or no?
He actually has a song called "Never Make a Promise in Vain," and that was used for a jingle for an Arpege commercial.
Okay.
So he was very ambitious, and he was always plugging his songs and always writing. And I always saw that, so I guess I was definitely inspired by it.
And now he, tell me, I read, besides the many you mentioned, Ella Fitzgerald was one. Also, Sinatra did one of his songs. Was it We Three, or was it one of the other ones?
Frank Sinatra recorded We Three with the Tommy Dorsey Orchestra.
Oh, okay.
And when they did the Sessions album, I believe it was Volume 2, actually, I believe it was in the early 80s, before my father had passed away, that it won a Grammy Award for Best Historical Recording.
Nice. I remember that, yeah.
Yes.
They kind of did what they could to kind of clean up
They remaster
the recordings, which again,
Yes.
As you saw from some of these older records, again, it is what it is. Although some people say the sound is good, when they were on 78s, yeah, that was a little more grainy and a little more pop involved than some of the recordings done in later years. That was before stereo even.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
There you go.
And now when you listen to CDs, there are a lot of, they make it extremely, extremely polished and get rid of the little glitches that might have occurred.
But the part of the reason LPs in a small way are making a little bit of a comeback is they're still the purists that feel that the LP is still the better way to go. So
yeah.
I think we're getting a sign that we're getting ready to wrap up. Is that correct? Okay. All right. So yes, thank you. The Poodles of Park Avenue, Karen-Cherie Cogane, here as we wind down the hour on Studio 411. And again, so real quick, what will we see in further adventures of Simone? Are there going to be perhaps little poodles in the picture, or we don't know?
Well, there might be.
I'll have to get a whole cast of actors besides the one we got.
That's right. I'm hoping for that animation. I'm plugging for that in the future. Well, one thing I can say is that Mojito has a girlfriend that he meets, and her name is Juanita, and she's feisty and she's incorrigible. She'll take a bigger role, as will the other characters.
Rosie Perez and John Leguizamo. There you go. All right. Karen, a pleasure. And as we leave Simone hanging out of the limo, we thank you for coming by, and we hope to have you back on again. All right.
Thank you very much.
The book, The Poodles of Park Avenue, Tate Publishing, www.tatepublishing.com, and also The Poodles of Park Avenue on Facebook, and also on what did we say before? Twitter as well?
On Twitter, and Google under Karen Cogane.
There you go. Very good.
Can read about her updates and her adventures.
Absolutely. We'll look forward to the casting of the film. I'll have a hand in that, you can bet. So.
I'll call you.
Absolutely.
And you can interview us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. All right. We thank Karen for joining us, and we thank you for stopping by to pay us a visit. And we look forward to seeing those of you out there the next time on another edition of Studio 411. I'm your host, Larry Dasilva, and we hope you have a great week. Thanks for joining us.